Hello, and welcome back to the show. I'm Don Cote, your host. Today, my very special guest is a legend among legends. Bengay III is a vibrant 83-year-old who shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon. If you're watching this, it's likely you remember the term human potential movement from the 60s. Ben is largely responsible for creating a company that was the launching pad for virtually every great teacher, speaker, and author of the time. People like Napoleon Hill, Earl Nightingale, Werner Erhard, Zig Ziglar, Og Mandino, and many more. We all get our share of opportunities in life. Ben seems to be one of those rare individuals that optimized every opportunity that came his way from a young boy, and he hasn't stopped well into his golden years. So I can't wait for you to hear from the legend himself, Bengay III. Back to the show, everybody. I'm Don Cote, your host, and I am so privileged to be here today with Bengay. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Been looking forward to it.
I want you to tell us what you're doing these days that's making a difference. And first, kind of give us some stepping stones. How did you come to be in such an amazing position of being able to do the work that you do today?
Well, I did what Malcolm Forbes said once about being rich. He said, pick your parents carefully. Uh, and I picked my parents carefully. I was born to two classy individuals, one a Southerner, my dad, and the other one had been a wealthy Bostonian, ran with the Kennedys and the Bushes
Ah,
and so on. So I started sort of upper class uh, when I was born. Dad owned a chain of portrait studios and so on. So I was born not into wealth or great privilege, but into a group of people who were used to being successful.
mm,
Jim Newman, an old friend of mine, the late Jim Newman, coined the term comfort zone. My comfort
mm.
zone got set high. Uh, I was raised 2 blocks, although I was born in Massachusetts, lived briefly in California. I was raised in Atlanta, 2 blocks out the front gate of East Lake Country Club, Bobby Jones' home course, and
Wow.
where just about everybody that was in Atlanta belonged. If you were doing well, you probably belonged to East Lake or visited there frequently. And I was
Mm.
allowed from the time I was 12, 13, 14 to sit in the men's grill with my father at the table with all these people. The only condition was don't say anything unless you're asked a direct question that there's no way to avoid, then answer it yes or no and shut up. And so I got that
It was a
little.
different time and place right back then.
Yeah, well, the good news was I got to learn and I didn't make a fool of myself. So
Mm.
it was a nice way to grow up. So my point is, I started off with a high. I didn't have any money, but a high set comfort zone. Yeah, and
Uh-huh.
I didn't know the term, of course, at the time. Jim hadn't invented it yet. But if everybody you know owns their own business, is successful generally in sales, and chairman of the board of Coca-Cola and so on, you sort of begin to think that everybody is like that. When you go out in the parking lot, Rolls Royces, Cadillacs, Lincolns, Dad was a Buick man, but the big Roadmaster Buick and so on. And I
Yeah.
just thought that's the way everybody lived. In fact, until I uh, started dating and expanding my horizon a little bit and got married, I didn't know that people lived without anything. I knew some
Mm.
kids that obviously their family wasn't doing well, but they were with us all the time, so they were doing well. They
Yeah.
went to the club and so on. So that was it, and everybody that I knew owned, or through my father, mother, and father, everybody that I knew owned their own business, and generally it was based on selling. So I just sort of came up in that atmosphere, and I didn't get a very good education. No one's fault. The public school system suggested that maybe I would do better in a private environment. So my
Mm.
dad sent me off to a boarding school, St. Andrew's Episcopal Boys School in in Swanee, Tennessee, where the University of the South is. And then I didn't do real well there, so I decided to leave. Forgot to tell the administration I was leaving. It's called running away. And
Okay.
when I got back to Atlanta, oh, funny story. We used to hitchhike into a little town called Mont Eagle, Tennessee, because it had a
Okay.
theater. And one of the ways we did it was the trucks had to slow down right at our driveway where St. Andrew's driveway hit
Mhm.
the road. And we would hop on the back of the ladder on the
Oh my
truck
gosh.
and then ride into Mont Eagle where there was a train crossing and they had to stop for that. And then you hopped off and went to the theater. So when
Very
I
strategic.
Yeah. So when I decided to run away, I hopped on the back of one of those trucks high up in the mountain. And it turned out they don't have to stop in Mont Eagle if there's nothing going on. They slow down. I hadn't experienced that. So I was hanging on
Oh,
the back of a truck from the top of the mountain over Chattanooga, Tennessee, all the way to Chattanooga. I'm
oh my gosh.
guessing
And I've
50.
been on that road. I know what that looks like.
Oh, and it's filthy because all that stuff comes up under the truck.
Sure.
You know. So that's how I got back into Atlanta and graduated from a place called Murphy High School. And I was elected wittiest in my class, which accounted for my low grades and the fact it took me 3 attempts to get through. Once you get a big laugh, you're hooked.
You're right.
Algebra and things like
Like a
that didn't have
drug.
any. Yeah, algebra had no interest to me. I was just after the next laugh. And then I got out of there, went to the went to, what do they call it back then? Georgia State College. It's now Georgia State University. I was elected president of my freshman class with the help of my running buddy, Jimmy Rucker, who was my campaign manager. And the bad news is I can't claim I was really president because I was never sworn in. I was elected president, but the inauguration was 3 weeks later. And by then I dropped out of college. So,
Okay. Wow.
so
All
I
right.
was off on my own. It was time to make
A
money.
different tangent.
I was sitting in a class, having been raised around successful business people. I'm sitting in a class, Business 101, I guess, listening to some guy who knew far less than I knew about business. And I
Mm.
just, somewhere in the midst of 3 weeks of his talk, I just folded up my notebook, turned Rucker on, and said, I'm out of here. I'm going to go do it, not talk about it. So off I
Wow.
went. I won my first sales contest when I was 11, selling Krispy Kreme donuts door to door. No trick to selling Krispy Kremes. The way you win the contest, you get up early, you knock on doors till no one will answer them anymore. And my dad taught me a little script. Knock on the door. In the South, there's screen doors, usually. Stand back where they have to open the screen door to see you. And when they
Ah,
open the screen door, hand them their Krispy Kremes and just say, here are your donuts, or here are your Krispy Kremes. No one, I don't think, ever refused them. And then if they took them, I said, now, is 1 dozen enough? And then they would buy 2, 3, 4 dozen. And so I won a bright red Columbia bicycle selling donuts door to door. And I was hooked. I thought, this
and
is
then you were
fun.
mobile.
Yeah. And yeah, like your motorcycle. I was up and running because I had a Columbia bicycle. So I had a few little events like that, all of which sort of led to selling. Uh, it's everybody around me sold. I had proven I could sell some stuff. Oh, and then one day my father found me, he came home from work, I guess, for lunch, and found me sitting in the living room. He said, what are you doing here? It was in the summer. What are you doing here? I said, well, I'm watching television or whatever I was doing. And he said, I want you to get a job. I said, I'm 14. No one's going to hire me. He said, mow lawns. I said, I don't own a lawnmower. He said, there's one down in the basement. It's got a handle sticking up. It's got 4 wheels. You've probably seen it. He gave me a little script. I started knocking on doors. And at 14, in the growing season, I had 20, 25 kids working for me. And my job was to knock on the door, get the business, come back and inspect the job, and collect the money, and then I split it with the kids. Oh, and it was no fee. Pay us what you think it's worth. And I said, Dad, what if they pay
Wow.
me nothing? He said, they won't. If you do a good job, they'll pay you more than you would have ever asked for. And he was
Mm,
right. After I
brilliant.
split it 50-50 with the kids, I had all I would have had if I'd mowed the lawn, and I didn't have to mow the lawn. They had all they would have had, and they didn't want to knock on the door because they were scared to death. Public speaking, the fear.
Right, right.
So,
Ben, excuse me for interrupting, but
yeah.
you just gave us a golden nugget from, the selling world. Most people think, yeah, you can make a lot of money in selling. Not that most people think they could ever sell, but you can make a lot of money in selling, but it's a solo kind of thing where there's no opportunity for leverage. But you immediately went into, I'm going to leverage this by having partners, and now you could do way more lawns than you could do by yourself. Brilliant. How did you learn that strategy, the leverage thing?
I probably in a conversation with my father. It sounds
Mm.
hokey, but people say, "Who were your greatest mentors?" Well, Dr. Napoleon Hill worked for me. Think and Grow Rich. Earl Nightingale worked for me. So I've had
Oh, we're
the
definitely going to have to hear that part of the story.
yeah, I've had the name mentors. The ones people go
Wow.
ooh, but my real mentor, my guide, was my father and my mother, but two different influences on my life. I just admired him so much, and I wanted to be like him. And he'd walk into a room, and he was the center of attention. Didn't act like it. It wasn't a blowhard or anything. He just walked in a room, and you knew his presence was there.
Mm.
I was talking to a guy on the phone the other day that if I ever talked to him, it would have been 75 years ago. He was a kid in the neighborhood, and he said to me, somewhere he said, "I get the feeling you really don't remember me." And I said, "I really don't. There were a lot of kids in the neighborhood and so on, but you and I weren't best buddies, or I would know you. But it seemed the stories you tell me seem familiar." He said, "Well, try this. A life-changing moment was when I went to your house one day, was sitting in the living room, and your father walked in." And he said he hadn't been there 3 or 4 minutes, and I don't remember what he said, but I said to myself, I want to be as cool as that guy someday.
Wow.
So that was sort of my mentor, that guy.
Yeah.
And
Got it.
it made everything else easier and feel so normal. When I started making a lot of money rather quickly, I was president of Holiday Magic Cosmetics when I was 25, having started at 23 with $91.41 investment. So in 2 years, I went from nothing to making a good deal. I was making, adjusted for inflation, about $400,000 a month part-time.
It was a
Holiday
big
Magic
deal.
Cosmetics was a multi-level marketing company. They call it network marketing now, so you won't know it's
And what year
multi-level.
did they start?
It started in 64. I answered a
Okay.
little ad and joined it in 65. And it was
Oh, they
rather
were really new.
quickly, yeah, it was quickly became the largest multi-level marketing direct sales company in the world. We had
Now, wasn't that
five
right around the time with Amway too?
Amway, Rich and Jay were good friends of mine and friendly competitors, but we were
Oh,
bigger.
wow.
We were bigger than Amway and Shackley, which was also around at the time. I think
Also,
that may still be. We were
they
bigger than
still are
Amway and
around. Yeah.
yeah, we were bigger than the two of them combined. So
Mm.
I really stepped in. And how did I become president? They ran a year-long contest. Big mistake. You don't run year-long contests, but they did. Because everybody knows who's going to win in the first 30 days, and the other 11 months are just wasted. But Zig Ziglar and I and my partner Jimmy Rucker had joined Holiday Magic the same Wednesday, September 15th, 1965, at noon
Wow.
at 1447 West Peachtree Street in Atlanta, Suite 300. Didn't have any impact on my life. I just
No,
just
no,
remember
no.
those
And
things.
and you certainly don't have a mind like a steel trap either.
Yeah, but as I walked into the office, I said to the lady, "Hi, my name's Ben Gay," and she said, "Yes, we've been expecting you." How the appointment got set up might be a conversation for a different day, because I really got my chain pulled hard. But
Mm.
behind me, there was a guy sitting on a sofa. He said, "Ben Gay." And I turned around. I'm used to Ben Gay jokes. So I turned around. And I said, "Yeah, I'm Ben Gay." Put out my hand. "What's your name?" He said, "Zig Ziglar." And I said, "With a name like Zig Ziglar, you're making fun of Ben Gay? What's wrong with you?" And we became buddies right away. Zig was 18 years older, but he had not yet had a big hit. Neither
Okay.
had I, but I was 23. so, uh, so he answered the same one ad I answered, and we thought it was a job interview, both he and I and Jimmy Rucker. It turned out it was an opportunity meet view, both he and I and Jimmy, me,
Oh,
and Zig. Rather quickly, the company had other subsidiaries. We had a motor oil additive, Bob Cummings. Your listeners know him. Bob Cummings Vitamins,
oh yeah.
Ameriprise cleaning products, and so on. So it became huge, and this year-long contest, number one prize was a mystery prize, number two was a Rolls Royce, three was a Lincoln Continental, so on. So the years going along, I know I'm
Wait,
doing,
second prize was the Rolls Royce? So there
yeah,
was something above that? Wow.
the mystery prize.
Mystery prize must be. Yeah.
So uh, I knew we were doing well, and I'm not stupid. I was doing better than anybody else in Atlanta, and that was one of their bigger markets and so on. But winning contests, I'm not a pins, badges, plaque person. I'm in selling because A, I enjoy it, and B, it pays well. So
Mm.
and if either one of those were missing, I wouldn't be in it. So, but there are other people who are contest driven. Zig was one of them. And so he probably knew where he was in the pickings all the way. But we get down to the end of the contest. I didn't know that. I sort of knew it was ending, but I didn't care. And but Zig did, and he was confident he was winning. So one night, last night of the contest, he had a victory party in South Carolina since he had won.
Oh,
And Jimmy Rucker and I held an opportunity meeting. It turned out that the winning difference between first and second place was almost exactly the amount of money that Jimmy and I raised or sold that night in that meeting.
wow.
So I was the
So
front
he
man.
he did that headline like Dewey won the presidency thing
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So that would be, yeah.
too soon, right?
Dewey defeats Truman was that
There you go.
famous headline. So I was flown to California to find out what the mystery prize was. They wouldn't tell me. I get there, I meet with William Penn Patrick, who ran for governor of California against Reagan and so on. A dynamic guy, one of my early mentors. And he took me out to dinner. And he said, "Well, you want to know what the prize is?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, and I'd met him before. I flew on a little 26-city tour, and I was sort of his front man. Carried the bags and introduced him.
Okay.
And so we had gotten friendly. He knew I wasn't a drooling troll. And so I said, "So what is the mystery prize?" He said, "You're going to be president of the company." And I said, "Wow."
Wow.
I could barely balance a checkbook. I didn't even know what being president meant. I was there because I could speak in front of a group and close sales. That's the only reason I was there. Well, Zig didn't have any business experience either. He was a salesman, and we salespeople tend not to get involved in details like P&L statements and
Big
so
picture.
on. So I became president, and the ride started. The good news was, I have a list I send to people if I don't know them, if I'm going to do a podcast about famous people I've known and worked with, and people go, "Oh, wow, this is unbelievable. How'd you meet all these people?" Well, I was president of the largest multi-level marketing and direct sales company in the world. Certainly in America is where I spent 90% of my time, but in the world. And we had the biggest meetings. So if you wanted to get up on stage and pontificate and sell your books or something, you had to get into a Holiday Magic, Stay Power, Bob Cummings Vitamin meeting. And if you were going to get on stage, I had to approve you. So people said, "How did you meet Og Mandino?" I said, "Well, I was going to the bathroom. I went down the hall. They were all over the place. J. Douglas Edwards, Zig Ziglar, the place was crawling with names that
Well,
became
what
legendary.
wasn't that just about the time where the human potential movement began? And wasn't there a division of holiday magic that had all those people come together?
Yeah, we had two seminar companies, Leadership Dynamics Institute and Mind
Mhm.
Dynamics Institute. Combined, they were the Leadership Dynamics Institute was an encounter group, which was popular in the 60s,
Mhm.
yelling and
Yes.
carrying on and so on. And I'm very proud of it, but it's hard to talk about out of context because people, it
Right.
sounds like a horror show, and it wasn't. But it was interesting. And Mind Dynamics was where I sent people who couldn't sell cosmetics effectively. And I said, well, you go over to Mind Dynamics because they sat around in circles and telepathically talked to dogs. And, it was sort of where I put the losers, although a lot of winners got there on their own. But it
Mm.
wasn't anything I wanted to spend a lot of time on. But out of that came just about every human potential movement you've ever heard of that era. EST, the
Right.
Forum, LifeSpring, about 1,500 companies, somebody told me one time, sprung
Wow.
from Leadership Dynamics and or Mind Dynamics. Werner Erhard went through Leadership Dynamics, EST,
Wow.
and was one of our better instructors at Mind Dynamics. So yeah, all that was going on, and to me, money-wise, because I own part of it, I created Leadership Dynamics, and had a piece of it and got it right off the top every month. Probably
Mm.
meant more money-wise to me than being president of Holiday Magic, and it's still, Don, what I do to a degree. People builders that I did at San Quentin and at Lompoc, uh, it was Leadership Dynamics toned down and a little different because you were talking to inmates and they weren't going to run out and start selling cars tomorrow.
Right.
But that's what I did, and it's what I still do. Here's a little secret to what we come out. How did I get where I got? Uh, no matter what I'm teaching, sales training, public speaking, human potential movement, whatever. No matter what I'm teaching or what it appears is going on, what I'm teaching is public speaking. It's the
Mm.
number one psychological fear, most studies say. And one
Yep.
study I read said it was ahead of death by fire on the fear
Wow.
scale. So I figured rather early in my career, if I could get them up on their feet speaking, it gave them confidence. And with confidence, you could drop them in anywhere and
Hmm.
they would do well. But in the beginning, it was so we had at 7:59, not 8 o'clock, because if you say meeting starts at 8, they show up at 8:10. If it's at 7:59, they show up at 7:50, which was sort of the goal. At
Interesting.
7:59, depending on the product they were selling and the country they were in, the language, hundreds of people walked to the front of their various rooms and said, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is, in my case, Ben Gay, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's special, fill in the company name, Holiday Magic, Stay Power, whatever, meeting." And then they went on word for word for 37 minutes. We built that company from nothing to today's equivalent of $3.5 billion a year. 99% were people who couldn't sell when they joined us, couldn't speak in public when they joined us, but by teaching them to get over that fear and a script, they had to be on script. And they showed a movie, ran about 15 minutes, and at the end of the movie it said, turn to the person who brought you here and ask him how you can get started in fill in the blank. And the lights came back up, and you saw whoever brought you whip out their legal pad and started drawing circles, verbatim, 6 closes, and you had to say them the way we taught them to you. And through duplication of effort, with proven, tested, slowly improving as time went on scripts, we built the largest company of its kind in the world.
So I know that many famous people, like Mary Kay, went through your program, and I know that Warner Earhart did because That's what they use in Landmark even today. Turn to the
Yep.
person that brought you here and ask them how you can get. I'm a graduate of the curriculum for living, so I've done all the Landmark work.
All right.
Another thing, just as a side note, where I didn't realize this. I mean, we've known each other, I think, since 2013 or something like that. We were both speaking at an engagement. I was the last guy on the roster, and you were the first guy on the roster. You were the head speaker, and
There's
I
two
was.
ways to argue that: the opening act and the closing act. You might have been
Yeah,
the
I was
top
the
guy.
warm up band. I was definitely the warm up. So, but we're both from the Boston area, except I came from the backwoods, and you came from Beacon Hill.
I was born in Springfield and lived in East Longmeadow.
Oh, East Long
60,
Meadow.
yeah, 60 Summit Avenue. I still know
Most
it.
of my family is from the Springfield Holyoke area.
All right. Yeah.
How about
It's a
that, huh?
lovely area.
But so many of those human dynamics folks, all of them started with you and then went on to be very famous. But there's one in particular who is my, I've never met him, but my mentor. I read his classic book, Think and Grow Rich, over 100 times. I lost count. And you had a personal, very close personal relationship with him. There you
Never,
go.
never
There it
far
is.
out of reach.
Right. Yeah. I highlight, I buy one a copy a year. I highlight it and give it to somebody that doesn't know about it. So many of my copies are out there in the world circulating. But
Mine too.
um, yeah, so I know I know I'm going to ask you to kind of circle back, but it's my favorite part of your story. If you could tell us how you were introduced to Napoleon Hill and the time you spent together, some of the things you learned from him.
Well, I was sitting in my office minding my own business as president of Holiday Magic. I wasn't looking for a mentor or a coach. Didn't know the term mentor, but I wasn't looking for a coach. And there was a knock on my door, and the knock was 2 times, and the door opens. That meant it was William Penpatrick. He wasn't waiting to be invited in. He was just giving me an alert that he was
Courtesy.
there. And he opened the door, and there he stood. And next to him was, I'm going to quit saying this now that I'm 83, but next to him was a little old man who turned out he was 84 when I met him. So I'd like
Wow.
to not be referred to as a little old man yet. Uh,
Okay.
and he
I
said, Ben, I
promise
want
never
you,
to say that again.
thank you. Uh, he said, Ben, I want you to meet someone. So being a Southern gentleman, I got up, ran around it was a big conference table, and went to the door, and I said, hi, I'm Ben Gay. And he said, call me Nappy. And now we're talking to an older man. I didn't know how old he was at the time, and I didn't know who he was. And Bill said, Ben, this is Dr. Napoleon Hill. Well, I'd read his book, but his book, the original one, which I also have, signed by him,
Me too. Oh,
uh,
I don't mine's not signed though.
yeah,
I
there's
have that
no,
same copy.
well, that one's not signed to me. There's a separate story there if we have time. But he said, this is Dr. Napoleon Hill. I said, oh, I've read your book. And Bill was sort of shocked I didn't know him. Well, I'd never seen a picture of him, except remember those old pictures with a high collar that he had back taken
Right,
in
when
the
he was
20s
very,
and
very
30s.
young.
Yeah,
Yep.
and he didn't look like that, so I didn't have a fair shot. Well, it turned out Dr. Hill had named William Penpatrick as one of the 5 or 10 or something most important living Americans in a book. There was a price for that, but that's beside the point. And he came out to give Bill the plaque and a signed copy of the book. And while they were, I didn't know he was in the building. Uh, Bill's office was at the very back, mine was at the very front, and there was no reason for me to see traffic. So apparently, I heard this from both of them. On the way back down the hallway to the front door, Bill said to Dr. Hill, I have a young man running this company, and he's doing a great job, but I sometimes get the feeling he's afraid to come ask me questions for fear, I'll discover he's unqualified or something, which was imposter syndrome is what we call it now. And I did suffer from some of that. And he said, so he doesn't ask me things that probably would save him time and money. Would you be willing to be his friend, mentor, whatever it was? He hired me a grandfather. In fact, Dr. Hill
Wow.
was old enough to be my great-grandfather, biologically. So they agreed before they got to my office, and he paid him $50,000 for the first year. That's a half a
In
million dollars
65?
in
In
65.
1960? That's a lot of money.
Half a million dollars. People say, did Dr. Hill make money? I said, well, he did that day because he was paid $50,000 to name Bill Patrick as one of the finest, greatest people in that book. That was $50,000. That was worth the trip. And then they struck this deal, so he made $100,000 that day. But Bill said to him, part of the deal was, all before they got to my office, I want him to be able to talk to you openly. I don't want you ratting him out. In other words, he can say anything to you and it doesn't go any farther. Dr. Hill said, fine, not a problem, so and so. When I heard that, I didn't believe it. I thought, well, he's being paid a lot of money by Bill Patrick. He'll do what Bill tells him. So there was a long involved story about a bunch of people trying to take over Holiday Magic and what he did to them. And when Bill would tell the story, veins would pop out on his neck. So one day I told Dr. Hill, I wrote a letter to Bill Patrick, put it in his secretary's desk, and said, Bill, if Dr. Hill should tell you that I'm trying to take over the company and so on, it was a test of it's not true, it was a test of the confidentiality that I'm supposed to believe Dr. Hill has. To my knowledge, I left the company a few years later, and then the company went bankrupt. And when they moved the furniture out, to my knowledge, that letter I wrote to Bill Patrick was still in the top desk of Marion McGinnis, his secretary, because there was never any reason. So I told Dr. Hill, there's a group of us, and what we're going to do is demand a percentage, of the company and so on. And Dr. Hill's total reaction to it was, don't do it. That would be stupid, dishonest, disloyal. Don't do it. And we never discussed it again. But I kept waiting for the knock on the door once Dr. Hill ran back. Because I promise you, if Dr. Hill had told him that story, Patrick would have exploded. It didn't happen. He'll kept his word. But what he told me, looking back, people go, oh, learning at the feet of the master. What he told me was common sense things, phrased a little differently. Sometimes it's hard to be a prophet in your own hometown. I'd call Dad.
But he's very quotable.
Yeah. He was a master at wordage, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
But I'd call Dad and say, you won't believe what Dr. Hill told me. And it would, blah, blah, blah. And then there was always a pause, and Dad would say, I guess I didn't phrase that properly. Because he had told me that his whole life. He told me one time in a meeting where I was delaying making a decision about a product line, when and he would never criticize me or even make a serious suggestion in front of other people. Office was cleared, door clicked shut. He was always sitting at the end of my conference table. If his head came up, I thought, okay, here we go. Because he'd wait for him to leave. But in this thing where I had strung out a decision, looking back, I could have made it in 30 minutes, but I'd strung it out over several weeks of meetings with my board of advisors, mastermind group. So we agreed to meet again next Thursday to plot and scheme some more, and his head came up and he said, Ben, you're dithering. Only a man his age would use that word.
Right, not a common term these days.
He said, you're dithering, take action, which is the secret message in Think and Grow Rich. He mentions it over and over and over again, take action. So every time I'm faced with a difficult decision and I start to procrastinate, I hear Dr. Hill's voice, take action. Speaking of taking action, can I tell you a little side story about Think and Grow Rich?
Please.
A friend of mine bought this at a garage sale for hardly any money. She'd worked for him, but she knew the story of Dr. Hill and everything. And she said, Ben, I thought you would enjoy getting this. It's signed by Dr. Hill. It says uh, to Mrs. Grace Dixon, with best regards, Dr. Napoleon Hill. Well, I went to open the book, and I won't open it now. The spine has never been cracked. So,
Wow.
being in the publishing business and in the seminar business, I can tell you the exact history of this book. Dr. Hill was coming to wherever Grace Dixon lived. No one seems to know. I even went to the house where Sandra bought the book, and she said, "No, that was just a book we had. I don't know Grace Dixon." So anyway, Dr. Hill was coming to town wherever Grace Dixon lives. She heard about it, bought a ticket, went and heard the talk. He would have been selling Think and Grow Rich at the time, and or Success Principles or whatever, the big
The law of
fat book.
success, you know.
Yeah, the law of success that he couldn't sell. So he wrote Think and Grow Rich, made it a
Right.
little more saleable. She went, got in line, bought the book, got in line, gave it to him to sign. He signed it. And then she took it home and put it in her bookcase and didn't look at it for the next 75 years. And here's how I know that. Here's the front of the book, cherry red. Here's the back of the book, cherry red. Here's the spine, bleached out.
Wow.
It went right in the bookcase. She never
Mhm.
cracked the spine, never opened it. This book has never been opened except when I open it to show to people, and I don't open it the day he signed it. Other than that, nothing. So Dr. Hill was up at the house one day, and his Marcia, my wife at the time, now deceased, had taken a copy of Think and Grow Rich and put it on the coffee table in the living room. So when we walked in, it was even aimed at where the way you would see it walking in. I thought, oh God, she's trying to make him believe we sit around cross-legged on the floor and read the book every night. And I said, it wasn't the first time it had been done to him, I'm sure. But I said, oh, look, Dr. Hill, a copy of Think and Grow Rich. And he nodded, and I stuck on something to say since I was in an awkward situation. I said, Dr. Hill, how does it feel to have written one of the best-selling books of all time? They used to say it was second only to the Bible. I don't know what they claim now, but tens of millions, 100 million sold over the years. I said, how does it feel to have written a book like that? He said, it feels pretty good. Best-selling, least read. It was fashionable to get a copy of Think and Grow Rich and put it on your office desk or whatever. The vast majority of people never read it or never got a deep understanding. I said, well, how do you know that? He said, I talk to people about it, and I know in 2 or 3 minutes if they've read the book or not. And most haven't and won't ever. And then I said, well, what's the deep secret? I've read it several times. I said, what's the deep secret? He said, I said it, I forget what he said, 17 times. I said it 17 times. Take action.
He says it. He actually says in the author's preface that I mention it in every chapter over 100 times throughout the book. I've memorized a lot. I've memorized a lot of the book because I've read it so many times.
Yeah. I have a friend, we do some stuff together, Mark Harris, who I tell people, if I had to get into a trivia question contest about Dr. Hill's work, especially Think and Grow Rich, and Dr. Hill was going to be there, I'd want him on the other team. I'd want Mark Harris on my team. I've written 35 books, and people say, what did you mean when you said this? I said, I don't know. What did it say? You write so much, you don't remember all of it. Mark Harris, his copy of the Laws of Success and Think and Grow Rich and a couple of others look like they've been through a food processor. They're so beaten up and stickers on it and things sticking out and so on. And if I quote him, like you just corrected me, if I quote something wrong, he says, well, that's not exactly what he said. On page 212.
Yeah, and you've introduced me to Mark, and you're absolutely right. He is a trivia genius when it comes to Think and Grow Rich.
I'm telling you, he is really something. So anyway,
Reminds
that's
me,
how,
I should invite him on the show.
that fills in the blank on Napoleon Hill, Ogmandino, J. Douglas Edwards, I wrote a book for him called Sales Closing Power for his family just because he never wrote a book, but it's true to his teachings. So I was around all those people, and you pick up something here and something there. I also, among the interesting people I met, sat in Charlie Manson's cell at San Quentin for a total of 9 hours, 3 different visits with him. That's sort of a what not to do example.
I
He,
can imagine. But
he
there was
had
something
one,
special about him that you pointed out to me when you explained to me for the very first time a few years ago about that interview. And do you remember that one thing that you told me was so unique about him?
well, two things. One, I go into his cell. He had a 2-bunk cell, but nobody wanted to sleep with him, so he used the top bunk as a bookshelf or
Uh,
a storage place. And on it was one book. He didn't even have the Gideon Bible in there. Everybody's got that because they come by, throwing them off the cart. But he had one book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And before I even sat down, I said, Charlie, I'd met him, but I hadn't sat down yet. And I said, what an interesting book to have. And it seems to be the only one in here. He said, Ben, it's my Bible. I couldn't have built the Manson family without it. So that's one of those lessons you learn. It's like a gun. You can have a gun and save the town if you're a paladin, Richard Boone's old television show, or you
mhm,
can have a gun and shoot up a school. So
mm,
it's not the gun, it's what you do with it, and it's what you do with the information in it. Probably you're referring to when he looked at you, I always said, I felt like he was looking in my eyes and out through the
yep,
back of my head. He was
yep,
mesmerizing, crazy, but
yeah.
mesmerizing. I've told Jimmy Rucker, my buddy, because I moved out here in '67 again. I'd
Out
been
here
here,
being in California.
California, yeah, into Marin County within sight of San Francisco. The Summer of Love, and that's when Charlie was
Oh,
wandering around building his little family. And I've told Rucker many
hmm
times, thank God we didn't meet him when we were young and
mm,
wandering around deciding what we're going to do with our life, because people as smart or smarter and raised as well and better joined his gang.
mm,
Tex Watson, who's I think he's still in prison if he's alive, became a minister. He could have become a minister on the outside. Sharp as a tack, bright guy, raised well, everything was right. But one day in Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco, he bumped into Charlie Manson,
mm.
and everything else spun out of control. But it was, yeah, his ability to mesmerize. I probably told you this too, but our listeners might enjoy it. I'm sitting there talking to him, and if a guard is coming down outside of the cell on the walkway or whatever you call it, the catwalk, and doesn't want to be heard, he holds his keys. And then when he's on you is the first time you know he's there because you can only see him right in front of your cell.
Mhm.
If he wants to be heard, he leaves the keys alone because they don't need a confrontation every 5 minutes. A lot of times they just want to count the bodies and go home and do the count. So we're sitting there, and I hear the keys jingling. I wasn't going to say anything, but I hear the keys jingling, and Charlie says, excuse me, and gets up, walks past where I was sitting, and goes over to the bars and goes, booga, 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 at the guard as he came by. And the guard said, hi, Charlie, how are you? And just kept going. Well, Geraldo Rivera interviewed Charlie Manson at San Quentin. He had armed guards around him and everything, and Charlie did that. And Rivera would relate the thing like, I faced death. And, well, Charlie was smaller than Sammy Davis Jr. I mean, he's a tiny little guy. He was not
Yeah.
physically imposing at all. He was mentally imposing. So anyway,
And I've met Geraldo, and he's pretty small too.
is he? I've never met him in
He is.
person. He's short.
Yeah, I met him
Maybe
at an
he's
airport one time, and I was really surprised. His head is big, much too big for his body, but he's actually, I'm 5'6", and he's about my height.
because on television, big head. I guess he
Yeah.
fills up the
Yep, talking
screen.
head.
Yeah. But anyway, he was impressed with Charlie's craziness and how
Yeah.
he stared death in the eye. Charlie was not. I wouldn't want to go sleep in the same cell with him.
Right.
But what Charlie wouldn't kill you, he'd have you killed.
Mm.
A judge in San Antonio, Texas, Judge Blair Reeves, he and I spoke at an event one time, and he presented me with a 10-gallon Stetson hat, cowboy hat.
Wow. You still have it?
And I don't know. I haven't seen it in a long time. It may be in a
Love to see
closet.
you in that, Ben.
Yeah. But his name was Judge Blair Reeves. Wonderful guy. Crippled and throughout his life, I guess. But just really something. So anyway, he gives me the hat. I go down after the meeting's over with my little crew, and we all wore black suits. It was the corporate uniform, tailor-made three-piece black suits. So it sort of looked like the mafia or the Secret Service had arrived when we walked into this nightclub, and I had my hat on because I just got it. And the guy was up talking, and I forget what he did. He was either a comedian or a singer or something. He looks up and he says, "Whoa, hold it, my man." And he points right at me. He said, "Pass this hat forward. Pass your hat forward." So I'm easygoing guy. I passed my hat, and it went up through the audience. And he picked it up, turned it around, put it on his head. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not the hat of a man who would whip your ass. This is the hat of a man who would have your ass whipped."
I see the connection now.
So anyway, I've met some fascinating, I was attitude coach for the astronauts, Apollo 15, 16, 17, worked with many of them. I've shaken the hand, if that's the proper grammar, of all 12 people who've walked on the moon. And I think almost everybody that was circling while they did it. Most of that crowd is passing away. Jim Lovell, one of the great astronauts of all time, just died the other day. Charlie Manson died 3-4 years ago at age 80, with followers still camped outside the gates at San Quentin,
Shocking.
hoping he would get out. He'd been in there for, I don't know, 50 years or something,
Yep.
hoping he would get out so they could marry him. Now that
Yeah.
takes, A, they got to be crazy, but B, you got to have some mental ability to get somebody to do that. I don't think there's a woman on earth, Gigi included, who would wait 50 years for me, especially if she had to sit in the grass.
Right, right. Ben, we're almost out of time. There's one more story I've really got to hear again. And you were very close to Earl Nightingale as well. Again, a lot of our listeners, viewers would probably remember him. What an amazing voice. Yeah, absolutely.
This
And
was given to me the same day Think and Grow Rich was given to me, this actual record.
wow. Yeah, just an amazing voice. But there's one quote that he had that has been so instrumental in my life. And he said, "Success is the realization of a worthwhile dream." And
Worthy ideal.
or a worthy ideal. I apologize. And the word ideal is the critical part because I created an acronym out of it. So I don't know how I missed that, but thank you for correcting me. Now we're even, by the way. And so, but I remember the story about the two of you playing pool, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Well, he was the worst pool player on earth to start. I had a big game room in the house I didn't build it. It was there when I bought the house. But a full-size professional bar, a Brunswick champion pool table, not the kind you get at Sears and stick in your basement. This was a serious pool table. And I used it as an icebreaker. People shooting pool will talk and tell you things they wouldn't otherwise tell you.
Right.
So between the bar, I wasn't drinking for about 10 years at that time. Between the bar where I could loosen them up and pool where they let down their inhibitions anyway, I had some of the most delightful conversations in that game room with Earl Nightingale among them. Trivia point. On more than one occasion, Dr. Hill, Napoleon Hill, and Earl Nightingale were both at the house on the same weekend,
Wow.
staying. And that's when I discovered that although in The Strangest Secret, the recording, Earl gives credit to Dr. Hill in that you become what you think about, which is the strangest secret, came to him one Saturday afternoon in his study while reading Think and Grow Rich. But even then, he says, the writing was awkward and the so-and-so was stale and so on. He wasn't impressed with the book generally, but that thing jumped out and made his career. That's how come we know Earl Nightingale's because of that. But he didn't like Dr. Hill. He didn't respect Dr. Hill. So weekends together in a house and then out on the boat, which they both liked to do on San Francisco Bay, was really awkward because it was like being between a married couple that's no longer married, and you want to sort of get through the weekend, without anybody saying anything. But Dr. Hill didn't have a good or bad opinion of Earl Nightingale, and didn't express any. He was a Southern gentleman, and I never asked him what he thought of Earl, and he never told me. But Earl was not a big fan of Dr. Hill. But to answer your question, I assume you're talking about when Earl Nightingale had a few too many drinks. The final game that I beat him in every game we ever played. My dad was a pool shark, and so I wasn't as good as he was. He was raised, his father owned pool halls in Alabama, so he grew up in pool halls. I never beat my father, not one game out of the probably hundreds we played. Never beat him once. He wouldn't even play father-son pool with me, where you let the son win once. Never beat me every time.
Wow.
Well, I beat Earl every time, but one time...
Character building.
Yeah, I guess. Humiliation is another one you might use. But Earl, with several belts of double bourbons in him, in a game he ultimately lost, got up on the pool table on his hands and knees for his final shot. And I said, Earl, I don't care, but you're supposed to have at least 1 foot on the floor.
1 foot on the ground.
Yeah. And he said, well, I'm not gonna. and then missed his shot. On the boat, within a day or two of that, I took him out in the company cabin cruiser, not the big one, but on the cabin cruiser. I'm in the Coast Guard. At that time, stationed reserve duty on San Francisco Bay. This is not an unknown body of water to me. I spent weekends on it in the Coast Guard and business time on it, entertaining people with our own boats. Somehow, we're coming across San Francisco Bay, and I missed a trough, probably preceded or followed by, a wave, but there was a trough. And so I'm cruising along. Dr. Hill's sitting behind me on a lawn chair, also a no-no, but I figured it's a smooth day, who cares? And Earl's standing up on the bow with a bourbon and soda looking out over the bay. He was on the Arizona, December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese hit it and blew it out from under him. Yeah, one of 19 Marines on board the Arizona, and I think 15 of them survived because they weren't down in the bowels doing anything. They were there for a ride. And so anyway, the bow of the Holiday Girl goes out of sight. I mean, we were just going down a wall of water and then came up the other side. And I don't have a picture of it, but I'm confident although it was a 50-footer, I'm confident we were 2 or 3 feet in the air before we came down and landed again. And I looked around. Dr. Hill's chair was toppled over, but he was okay, and he waved. And I look up, and Earl's gone. I'm standing at the wheel. I'm looking up on the bow. No Earl. So I cut the power, ran up, looked over the edge, and there's Earl in the water. He had gone over the edge, so I pulled him up, and he came up with his glass. It would make a better story if I told you the bourbon and soda was in it, but I suspect that was seawater. But he came up with a glass full of liquid. And I said, Earl, I am so sorry. He said, Ben, don't worry about it. If the Japanese couldn't get me at Pearl Harbor, Ben Gay isn't getting me in San Francisco.
And on that note, Ben, we're going to have to end, but I would love to invite you back because your specialty is teaching people how to be successful in sales. And one of the things you and I have discussed many times is that most people don't really understand that everybody's a salesperson. You're selling your wife on not cheating on you, your kids are not doing drugs, and your boss on giving you a raise, and your employees on working harder. We're selling all the time, no matter what. That's why public speaking is such a critical aspect of being able to speak well and persuasively. So I'd love to invite you back to talk specifically about that. Would you come back?
Sure. You name
Awesome.
the day and time, and I'll be here.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your friendship, and I can't wait to post this because I know it's going to be one of our viewers' favorite episodes. So thank you very much, Ben. Hang out for just a second. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Don Cote, your host, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.